Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and if you don't know me, my goal is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new on this channel, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos and so that you can join our really cool drawing community. So in this video, we are going to be drawing some really cute little birds just like this one. And you can follow this tutorial along using pretty much any digital art software, probably even pencil and paper would work. So grab your drawing tools and let's get started. So as usual, we are going to start by creating a canvas, at least if you're drawing in a digital art software. These are the dimension of my canvas, but it really just depends on your own project. The only reason I am using these dimensions is because I am painting in a pre-textured file, which as you can see here, there's this cool watercolor texture, but that's really the only reason. And don't worry, this file is totally optional, by the way. And once you have your canvas, we're just going to start by creating a new layer. And I highly recommend that you take just a few extra seconds to rename your layers. It makes a big difference in the end. So this one, you would just rename it to sketch. Now you can sketch with any color of your choice. I like sketching with a dark gray, but that's just my personal preference. And for this tutorial, I will be using my watercolor brushes, which will be linked in the description below, along with a promo code just for the YouTube people as usual. But don't worry, I'm also going to be suggesting just regular brushes that come with Procreate. So for the sketch, you could use the HB pencil that come in the sketching panel. Otherwise, if you have the watercolor brushes, just use the coloring pencil. And we're going to start by sketching this like bean shape, almost like half of a peace and love sign. So this is going to be the body of the bird. And at this stage, don't worry about being precise, don't even erase. Just go and sketch very loosely because the sketch is not even going to be in the final product. So once you have the body, go ahead and sketch a circle for the eye, which is pretty much going to be in the center of the head. And then right next to it, on one side, you're going to draw another circle that is going to be slightly bigger, and this one is going to be the beak. And on the same side, you decided to draw your beak, so the circle we just sketched here, we're also going to draw an oval. And this oval is going to be for one of the wings. And on the opposite side, you're going to draw just like a tiny crescent moon, because this wing is basically hidden by the body, but we kind of see it a little bit. For the tail, I like to go with very simple teardrop type of shapes. I like to draw 3, but you could go, 3, 4, 5. It would all look really good. For the wings, I also like to add a little bit of detail, so just splitting the oval in 2 halves, and then the bottom half adding little I was gonna say fingers, no, little feathers in there. That's just optional, but I think it's really cool and it makes the piece a little bit more interesting. And then you're gonna split the beak with this S-curve like this, and you might want to make the top part a little bit bigger than the bottom part. So you can see here, I just extended the point of the beak, like the pointy part, and also making him smile a little bit and adding a little nostril. Isn't a nostril in a bird? But you get what I mean. If you feel like it, you can fill in the eye, which is really rough sketch lines, but that's totally optional. Again, we're not gonna have this sketch on the final product. You can also add some little feathers on the top of the head, depending on the type of bird that you want to draw. I think they add so much character. And I kind of use the same type of shapes here as for the tail, so kind of curved raindrop type of shapes. And again, you can have 3, 4, or 5, and that would look really good. For the feet, you can go with just 3 little bean shape. That looks really cute and it's super simple. No reason to get complicated here. And at this point, if you want to tweak your sketch a little bit, you could use the eraser and go back and redraw, or you could use the liquify tool in the adjustment panel, set it to push, and the size you would have to experiment with it a little bit, but this tool allows you to just move your drawing around without having to redraw it, so that's really helpful. It is better to do it at the sketching phase because it kind of stretches the pixel, and if you do it too much in your final product, you're actually going to see some loss of quality. But right now, you could just move stuff around as much as you want until you have a shape that you like. You can also use the selection tool and select one little part of your sketch and then move it with the arrow. So for example, I didn't like the placement of the eye, so I just selected it and then moved it with the arrow and placed it where I wanted it to be. But anyway, once you have a sketch that you like, go ahead and set the blending mode of the sketch layer to multiply and lower the opacity until you can just barely see it. So again, this sketch is not that important, we just want to have a rough idea of where we're going to place the color. Speaking of the color, go ahead and create a new layer. This one, put it below the sketch and rename it to Body. If you have the watercolor brushes, we're going to start with the Dark Edges watercolor brush. Otherwise, if you go in the airbrushing panel, so free brushes from Procreate again, if you select the hard brush, you can lower the opacity, which is going to be a slider on the left or the right, depending on your interface, and you can just lower it around 30%. And this way you're going to get the overlay effect that you would get in watercolor. You're not going to get any texture, of course, but it is definitely better than nothing. So that is one thing you can do. But if you have the watercolor brushes, of course, go with the Dark Edges watercolor. And for the color, you can really draw any color you want for your bird. That is like so up to you. You can have really colorful birds. They would be really, really cute. But I'm just going to go with this white bird with yellow feathers on its head. I think it's just so sweet. So for that, I'm going with a very, very, very light powder blue. And you're just going to fill in the main body shape without lifting your pencil, because every time you lift your pencil, you're basically resetting the color, and we're going to create overlays that way. And we're going to use the overlays later, but for now we're trying to just color in the main shapes individually. So you can see I'm coloring the body like I was saying, and now I'm moving on to the tail, one feather at a time. You're also going to color in the wings, of course. And yeah, basically everything that is part of the main body of the bird, you are going to color in at the sketch. You're not going to color in the legs, the beak, and the feathers on top, really just the main body, which includes the wing and the tail. And sticking to this body, we're going to go and add a little bit of dimension. So using either the basic water brush or the brush that you were using at first from the airbrushing panel, you're just going to layer your colors, so using this overlay effect. If you're drawing with a super pale color like I am, you're probably going to want to make it darker, but if you're drawing with just more of a regular, normal color that is not like almost white, you can probably not even change the color and just layer your strokes, which is going to make the color darker and darker every time that you add a layer of color, basically. So we're really just adding shadows to make the bird a little bit more three-dimensional. So below the wing, on the wing that is pretty much hidden, on the bottom part of the body, probably a little bit on the tail as well, but nothing too precise here because we're going to blend these shadows and colors in later. So you just go ahead and kind of place the main block of colors. So this is a step where if you wanted to have some pattern on your bird, you could also patterns on your bird, there we go. You could also draw them. So if you wanted to have a bird that has multiple colors on the body, you could add these multiple colors here. And just so that this tutorial doesn't last forever, I'm gonna stop here, but you could add as many different shadow colors and as many colors as you want in general at this step. So feel free to pause the video and we'll meet at the next step. Once you have your body all colored in, go ahead and go back to your Dark Edges watercolor or stick with the same brush that you've been using from the airbrushing panel. And we're going to draw these secondary elements. So I'm going to go in and add some yellow on the top feather of the head, but again, the color is totally up to your own liking. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you can pick the color that you want. Basically, that's all I was trying to say. And I quite like to add the same color kind of on the cheek area. And again, going really, really roughly, so like a blotch of color that we're going to blend in later, but it just makes everything super, super cute. For the feet, I like to go with a grayish brown color, and that's the same that I use for the beak as well. So for the beak, I like to draw the entire shape all at once. So without lifting the pencil, the entire beak, and then going back in and overlaying the bottom part so it looks like it's kind of in shadow and it kind of separates the two sections of the beak really nicely and very quickly. For the feet, nothing too complicated. You just fill in your little beans with color, just like for the rest of the body and the extra elements. And guys, if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and comment the word parrot below. I know it sounds crazy, but it gives me a lot of insight in how to edit my videos better, which in turns help me create better tutorials for you. And it's also really cool because you guys know me, but I don't know you. And whenever you leave a comment, I get to see your name, sometimes your picture. And it's just so cool for me to see the drawing community that we're building here on this channel. So just go ahead and comment the word parrot below and we'll keep going. So at this point, we can create a new layer for the eye. I like to place it on a separate layer so I can move it around, but you could draw it on the extra layer as well. And I like to go with a very dark gray, not quite black, and just quickly color in the circle in one fell swoop, and then on the top half overlaying so that there is some depth in the color, basically, just so it's not like one flat color for the eye. So now that we have everything, we can go ahead and hide our sketch layer. I know right now it looks crazy, but bear with me, we're going to make everything come together very nicely. So go ahead and pick your eraser and set it to the soft brush from the airbrushing panel, and we're just going to erase, oops, wrong layer. Going back on the body layer, you're just going to erase a little bit light on the bird itself. The reason I use the eraser is because we're using watercolor brushes with transparency. It's just basically it's easier to erase if you want to go back to a lighter color than to try and add more color on top. So now we're going to blend everything in, which believe me is going to really help. So you could either use the smudge tool, setting it to the soft brush, or if you have the watercolor brushes, just use the water blender as your paintbrush tool, not a smudge tool, just a regular paintbrush. And you're really just going to blend in all the weird digital edges that we've created, adding all of the separate like colors and shadows. We're just going to make it look nice right now. So if you had multiple like colors in terms of patterns in the body, you would obviously not want to blend all the patterns together, but you do want to blend the color variation and the shadows in for sure. So you can see it already looks way better. And we're going to also do this on the extra layer, starting with this cheek area that we've created. We're going to soften it up, and wow, it improves everything so quickly. Same with the beak. We want to make sure that the edge like between the two parts of the beak stays really sharp, but we do want to blend the shadows on the bottom part. And we're also going to blend in this eye to make it just so soft and cute. So by now your little bird should really be starting to come together, but we're going to add a few more layers with details that are going to make all the difference, and it's going to bring the piece really to the next level. So make sure you stick around until the end. The first thing you're going to do is we're going to create a layer called lights. And for this, you're going to pick just the purest white possible, as well as the brush that you use for sketching. So in my case, the coloring pencil, but you might be using the HP pencil. And yeah, we're just going to add some little dots on the eye, and it's going to make your parrot come alive instantly. So I like to go with 2 little dots. You could go with just 1. You could also go with just a line. So experiment here, but I think 2 little dots are really cute. And you can also add a very thin line on the top of the beak, which is just going to make it look shiny and more interesting in general. Okay, so we're pretty much at the last step now, honestly. So go ahead and create a new layer. And on this layer, we're going to add a little bit more details and texture. So rename this layer to details. I know this name is really original. I outdid myself on this one, but anyway, you're going to change the blending mode of this layer to multiply and leave the opacity at 100 for now, but we're going to go back later and tweak it. And I like to use pretty much the same color that I use for my beak, which is like a brownish gray color. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by quickly outlining the bird itself. And I like to go with lines that are not like perfect, like inking line art type of deal. I like to go with more rough, sketchy lines that are not as rough as the like real sketch that we did at first. So we're basically kind of doing a clean sketch, if that makes any sense, on top of the bird. And here you can really play with the thickness of your strokes and just get something that looks cool, that is your vibe. If that is not your vibe, if you would rather have something soft without any outlines, you can skip this step altogether. But I would highly recommend it because we're going to be able to add a little bit more interesting stuff in here. So you might need to reactivate your sketch layer, especially when you're drawing the wing, just so that you can see the different feathers and everything, but yeah. And you're also going to go back in the beak and add this little like smile that goes out of the beak, and it's just so cute. I just can't get over this little bird. I love him so much. But anyway, so yeah, you can also add some little patterns and extra textures. You can see here I'm drawing outside the eye, but I'm also adding some little like slightly curved line on the bottom part of the eye that just kind of shows this idea that it's not like a flat plastic bird. It's actually has some little feathers without having to draw all the feathers. That would take so long. So you can just add a few there, and it's just going to show this idea that it's not just like purely flat. And for the little toes here on the feet, I like to sketch the bean and then add some curved lines that kind of curve upwards to again show a little bit more texture and make it feel like it's not just this flat plastic toy bird. But right now I think that these lines are a little bit too intense. So like I was saying, we're actually going to go back to our layer panel and kind of tweak the opacity a little bit. You could also change the blending mode. Sometimes it looks good if you put it in linear burn. That just depends on the color you picked for the outline and the color you picked for the body. So just go and play around with the opacity as well as the blending mode until you find something that you like. But you can see here, it's not too intense, but it does add a little bit of detail and texture that just looks more interesting in the end in general. And at this point, you might want to group your layers just so that your file is a bit more neat. So just swipe your layers towards the right, and then there's going to be a group option that pops up at the top of your layer panel, and you can just group them very easily. One reason I like to draw on separate layers is if there's an element that I want to move, you can easily just select the layers on which this element is, and then with the selection tool and the arrow tool, relocate the element. So for example here, I didn't like the eye, so I just went ahead and selected all the layers on which the eye elements were and just moved those around. If you want to add even more details, you can add some little ovals using the same brush that you use for your main colors, so probably the Dark Edges watercolor. And still on your detail layer, you're going to go back to the color that you use for the body, and you're just going to draw little ovals on some areas of the bird. So here I draw kind of 3 very pale ones on the wing, then 2 on the side, and just kind of sprinkle them around. And that's kind of, again, showing maybe the idea of feathers without having to draw individual feathers, which just would look a little bit too much. So you could really experiment here and draw as many little ovals as you want. I recommend drawing them in groups of 2 or 3. That's kind of what I feel looks the best, but again, feel free to experiment. It is your own creation after all. Another cool thing that you can do is going back on the body layer, and with the selection tool set to freehand, just make a soft selection in the bottom of the bird and then feather the selection somewhere between 20 and 30%. Going in the adjustment panel, selecting hue, saturation, and brightness for the entire layer, you can then lower the brightness, which is going to effectively create a shadow on the bottom part of your bird. And once you're done, you can just quit this menu by tapping back on the selection icon. If you want to change the entire color of the body, just go in the adjustment panel, again, hue, saturation, brightness for the entire layer, but this time without any selection. And at this point, you can change kind of the hue and the saturation so that you can get a totally different color scheme very quickly, super easily. So here I just went ahead and made my bird a little bit more gray and less blue. If you want, you can also add a branch. So for that, you would create a new layer above the body and below the extra layer. And this layer you would rename to branch. I'm always struggling with this function, as you can see, but anyway, we always get it to work in the end. So a new layer named branch, and for this layer, you're just going to go with, you know, a regular brown, because a branch is usually brown. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. It's getting so late here, guys. Yeah, and with the same brush that you use for your body, so the Dark Edges watercolor, you're going to draw a branch. And for the branch, I like to go in with multiple strokes and layering them, because that kind of automatically really quickly creates kind of a bark effect, so kind of a wood feeling. And you can also add some little leaves, so with a nice bright vibrant green, drawing some leaves kind of at the top of the branch or the ends of the branches. And you can see, I don't know why, but I really like having my leaves not touch the branch itself. I know that might be strange, but I think it looks good. And you can also add, kind of balance out by adding leaves on the other side of the branch. And you can also go back, and since we're using watercolor brushes or brushes that have some opacity or transparency to them, I should say, you could go and like overlay your color on just one half of the leaves. So that's a really quick way of making them a little bit more interesting without spending too much time. And the last thing we have to do is to erase parts of the branch that would be kind of behind the feet of the bird. So using the eraser tool, of course, and erasing this part where it overlays. And you might also have to erase a little bit of your detail layer, so you can see it kind of overlaps with the branch here. So I'm just going to really quickly erase it, and we're pretty much going to be good to go. Or good to go, I mean, good to go where? We're done. So yeah, this was how to draw a really cute bird in Procreate, or pretty much any digital art software for that matter. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up because it really does help the channel. If you want to check out the brushes that I use, they will be linked in the description below along with a promo code, and I would love to see the birds that you guys create. So make sure to share the results with me either on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And before you leave, don't forget to subscribe because I put out new videos just like this one every single week. I'll see you soon.